Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments, everybody. My name is Andy Pace. It's been a while since we've talked. We've been off for the summer. Summer is always our busy time of the year here at the Green Design Center. Lots of projects going on, lots of new customers. It's interesting. A lot of my new customers lately have been coming to me with a story that I haven't heard before or very little of in my 30-year career. It seems like as soon as it was brought to my attention, all of a sudden now this is happening more often. And so I was on a podcast several months ago with Andra McHugh, and Andra is uh, educating people all about the dangers of what's in our environment causing eczema and other skin irritations in our kids. And I'll be honest, it's something that really wasn't on my radar until I started researching for on my episode with her, and then during that conversation, it just kind of dawned on me like this is an enormous problem. And ever since, so many people have been reaching out saying either I heard you on Andra's show, or just coincidentally they started talking about it. So Andra, I'd like to welcome you to the Non-Toxic Environment Show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Andy. I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Fantastic. You really did open up my eyes to this because while I knew about it, and I knew obviously that all types of irritation can be an issue because of the built environment, whether it's mold or bacteria or chemicals. And so many of my clients over the years have had a chemical sensitivity that ended up with, almost like a contact dermatitis issue. When I started doing some research for my episode with you on your show, it started to like correlate in my head, like this is obviously a bigger issue. And obviously I don't hear from kids are not hiring me, the parents are hiring me, the adults are hiring me. And after talking with you in your show, I have now been sort of opened up to this, and I find that so many of my clients are actually talking about this, and I'm really hearing it now. So congratulations to you, and educating people on this. But obviously you got to this point because of a personal story, and maybe just share with us a little bit about that story.
Sure. Well, my name's Andra McHugh. I host the Eczema Kids podcast and have the Eczema Kids brand. And I really walk parents, mere mortal parents, through a holistic way to heal not just eczema, but just other autoimmune conditions. Because, I mean, unfortunately, and we were talking before we started recording, it's just so prevalent. There's just more and more kids being born with these kind of conditions, and it's just really unfortunate. I mean, their inflammation buckets are already full before they get to this earth. And my third baby was that exact same situation. She was literally born with eczema. Like, she just that red peeling that newborn babies have, it never stopped. It just got worse and worse and worse, as the weeks went on. And at the same time, this was 5 years ago, my toddler also just like came down with severe eczema. And then my 4-year-old at the time had celiacs. I didn't know. She was just throwing up all the time. And so I was 3 for 3 on autoimmune conditions. And I'm a healthy person. We eat vegetables, like we filtered our water. I didn't eat Cheetos. Like, it was just it just all came like crashing in all of a sudden. And went to the pediatrician, and they're like, all we can do for you is steroids and bleach baths. And I just like, this isn't going to be acceptable for my newborn baby or my toddler or anyone in my family. And I just had to find a different way. And so then I just dedicated my life to researching and experimenting. I was still working in the dental industry at the time, and I just spent like the time literally in between going to my two girls' bedrooms in the middle of the night. Like, they were just crying and so itchy and uncomfortable all night long. Like, that time in between, like quelling their cries, I was researching and reading, because there was just no sleep to be had. Like, it was just the hardest time of my life. And nothing triggers you like watching your kids suffer. And then also that level of exhaustion, doesn't do anyone any favors. And I'm just like really dedicated to helping families get out of living like that, because that's just not a way of life. And our kids deserve better, and our families deserve better. And so it's just about bringing about more health, which results in more joy.
Wow. And I'm so sorry to hear the story, but it's so important for people to hear it because, it's tough enough being a new parent, right? In today's world with all the things that our kids are inundated with on a regular basis, but then to have these health issues, and at the time you really didn't know what was going on, and again, you're going into that analysis paralysis essentially, where you're just digging into things so deep, it just at some point it becomes overwhelming. It's like a heavy blanket that you just can't get off. And the fact that, moving forward a bit now, you are using what you have gone through and what your family has gone through to now help others is truly commendable. And I thank you for that. And I'm sure thousands of families thank you for this. And it is certainly needed. Obviously, in my line of work, it's all about the house, but it's it's common that the conversation goes to, all right, now what else is happening? Is obviously there's autoimmune issues, there's mold sensitivity, there's chemical sensitivity. So now we get into, it's not just the house, but how did you get to the person that you are? So, but with kids, it's supposed to be a clean slate. It's supposed to be, you start from scratch. It's an uncorrupted child. How does how does a child get born or become born with an autoimmune?
I mean, that's what's so crazy, right? Like they inherit all of our exposures, unfortunately. As I
Mm,
mentioned, I was in the dental industry. That's a really deleterious industry to work in.
yeah.
Unfortunately, you're just bombarded with radiation and chemicals from every side. And everything that's going into the house. Like we moved into a recently renovated house while I was pregnant with my second daughter, who also suffered from eczema. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. I don't know, like I worked at a photo shop when I was in high school. Like
Right.
that's just chemical bath after chemical bath, right? And like same
Sure.
as my job as a lifeguard. All of these things, all of these exposures, they add up. And then I couldn't believe it when my kids were just born into this state of subpar health. And you know, what we've come to know and what I've seen through my clients, but first myself, is like how important getting your home, their environment that they are spending most of their hours, like even if they're older, even if they're teenagers, they're
Mhm.
spending most of their hours in the home, right? Like when you count like the sleeping hours,
Oh yeah.
and they're just so susceptible to these assaults. And it's easy to underestimate, I think, because sometimes it would make your brain explode, like how severe and significant these assaults can be. Just you sitting in your living room or laying in your bed. And so, like, there's a whole section of this type of thing that I talk about because it's 100% required for healing, is to eliminate or just, reduce. You can't completely eliminate, but reduce these everyday inflammatory exposures that are just coming from your living environment. And that's why I was so excited to connect with you, because you have a PhD in this and you know exactly what to do. And at the time, like I just had to research my way out of it. But it's it's a it's a whole prong of the approach for holistic healing. Like this is required.
I used to call, and we still do, we call the chemically sensitive individuals the canaries in the coal mine. Those are the ones who are telling us there's something wrong here. They walk into a space, they instantly get that, either that severe headache or nausea or that reaction, whichever it is, that they'll have because of chemical exposure. And everybody else will say, I smell nothing. There's no problem here. What's the big deal? And they have a reaction. So we have to listen to those canaries, or listen for those canaries. But, you know, I see this with young children. This too is a canary in the coal mine situation. And now I assume, and maybe you can correct me here, but your background working in a photo studio, working in a dentistry office, all these exposures, did you ever have these types of reactions as an adult while you were doing these jobs, or did they just pass along to your kids?
Yeah, never. It just
See,
it passes the lungs. I think it just, you take it in, it's like stored in your tissues,
yeah,
all the antibiotics that I ever took my
right,
whole life, all the, birth control, all the things, just the normal things that you
yeah.
go through in Western society today. I think it
Hmm.
just is stored inside your cells, inside your tissues, and that's what gets passed along.
Because I can recall, as a child or when I was a child growing up and learning that, back when I was born, 53 years ago, I think my parents probably didn't have the concern that parents have today with you can't have certain types of cheeses while you're pregnant, and you can't have certain types of meats, and you should avoid this and avoid that. And I mean, it's interesting. Back then, well, if they had a couple of cocktails, not a big deal. If your mom smoked at the time, probably not a big deal. Um, and they would always say, "Oh, you turned out just fine." It's interesting how in the last 50 years it's turned into now you have to avoid everything as an expecting mom. But even so, if you start that avoidance when you learn you're pregnant, okay, that I understand that. But what you're saying is avoiding it while you're just living your life before you get pregnant, because I mean that's a whole new avenue to look at this.
I guess, and that's it's a more stressful way to look at it. I mean, there's nothing that you can do,
Right.
like in the past. Like the past is the past, and there's nothing
Right.
that you can do to change it, can't change it. You got to move on. But yes, prevention is like the best medicine. So if you're in a place, yeah, I mean, I guess just the best time to start paying
Yeah.
attention is now. And in educating parents in this way, they can start to protect their kids in this way. Because I just believe, like, yeah, I mean, certainly our parents had an easier time. Like
Right.
it didn't seem so prevalent. And I don't know, but I would guess that, one, I do know that there's definitely more like pharmaceuticals being written up, right? Like
Hmm.
that's since I was a kid in the 80s, like that's definitely happened, right? And more processed foods have come into the mix, and that's a huge contributor, and more glyphosate, has been sprayed on those, and that's a huge contributor. But like I would assume like the building materials that
Yeah.
have been gone
Yeah.
into our homes have changed dramatically. And that is a big reason that we're seeing these alarming trends that we are today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, I'm not trying to, raise people's anxiety on this. I guess my point is back in the day, back when I was a kid, back, before my time, parents didn't worry about this mainly because we're talking about um building materials and and our food wasn't so tainted with the things that it is now. And so our bodies were born into this world being able to handle what was sort of given to us. But as we evolve as a species, and we're evolving because in good ways and bad ways, or I guess devolving, we are now born with the legacy of what has happened in the last 50 years and longer. I was having a conversation with an expert of electromagnetic fields a few months ago, and he told me this little tidbit, and it just, I mean, I understand this, but it just blew me away when I heard it. 150 years ago, we didn't have electricity. We had none of the electromagnetic field issues that we have today. For the past tens and hundreds of thousands of years, humans never had anything more than just the magnetic polarization of the Earth to be the only EMF issue to deal with. In the last 150 years, we're dealing with an inundation with Wi-Fi and electricity and so forth. And so, if you look at it big picture, we are asking humans to evolve in 150 years, where we've been evolving for a million years. So look at it now with the chemicals, and especially chemicals in foods. It's not hasn't been around for 150 years. It's been around for 50. It's been around for just a blip in time, And we're seeing the effects of it now in our kids. We're seeing the effects of it ourselves. And so we need to utilize the technology we have and the ability to educate ourselves to do something about it. And you know, your show and what you do is a perfect example of how we need to educate and deal with this and in alarming the world that this is a problem. And here's how what we do to avoid it.
Yeah, that's everything both of us do. It's just like, hey, the world is what it is, but here's what you can do as a mere mortal parent. Like, here's what you can do to reverse this and fix it for yourself, and then ultimately like help others make these changes as well. Because it's just like going to the pediatrician. It's not what you get when you first first in line when you talk to the initial person that's going to help you. Like, that's just not the way that they go about things. It's not going to be the path that you're taking on, and you have to advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for your family in every sector of your life: healthcare, your house, the school, all of it, just for this alternative way
Mhm.
that I'm hoping then eventually through the course of all of this, everybody, all the content creators that are out there, it'll change that the normal way will become a little less inflammatory.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I talk about this every once in a while when I'm doing a show like this, and I talk about how um, the internet is fantastic for a lot of things. Um, the availability of information is just amazing. However, one of the things that I always have a little bit of an annoyance with is just this being inundated with these online influencers, people who are essentially not very knowledgeable, but they have really good marketing, trying to convince us how to do things in our life. But then there's folks like you who that's secondary. You actually have knowledge about it. You live this and you've been able to deal with it to a point now you're ready to educate others on how to avoid these problems or how to deal with them, how to cope with them. And I can only applaud you for what you're doing because it's a commitment. Obviously, it's a commitment to this all the sleepless nights and all of the research and all of the emotional trauma and seeing your kids go through this, but then to commit to saying, you know what, now that I know all this, I need to let others know. So, how has that process gone for you in creating your online community and your listeners?
I would say it's been a labor of love for sure.
Yes.
Like it was, but that's what keeps me going is, our kids deserve better. Like they're our future. This cannot continue. They cannot continue to be born into these circumstances, to be born already with this subpar slate of health, and, to live, just literally be uncomfortable in your skin. Like, that's not acceptable. And so, just when I think like that's it, I'm just gonna go get a normal job or just be a mom, like stop staying up so late and doing this, then I get another message that's just it's like, oh my gosh, you've changed our lives. And so that's what that's what keeps me going.
So I want to talk about a little about that because I agree with you 110%. It's like it is a labor of love. What you and I do is, you know, I will never be a wealthy person. I don't necessarily want to be a wealthy person. I want to make sure my family and my employees are taken care of. But it's become this is what I have to do. I wake up in the morning and this is what I have to do. And without it, uh, I feel that you know, this is my sole purpose in life. Um, at least from a standpoint of what I can give to the world.
Mhm.
So what keeps me going is getting an email or a postcard or just a voicemail message from somebody saying thank you because this has totally helped us. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, maybe somebody recently who reached out to you and gave you that thanks that just gives you that extra bit of encouragement to keep on going.
Yeah. I mean, luckily now I get them every week, which is I need it. It's just, my students, like, they initially they come on and they're like, "Oh, whew, this is a lot." And it's like, and I'm there to support them through it. And we have a coaching call, and then I do Voxer support because things come up, because kids and curveballs, they literally come up every single day. And especially when you're trying to learn just a different way of life. And it's not even about working harder. It's just doing things differently is
Mhm.
what, like I show people how to do, and so that you can result and heal their gut lining, and result in like healthy, happy kids. And I don't know, it just helps, like, literally within a week, every single one of them are like, they're sleeping better. It's not
Wow.
like they're 100% cured or anything like that, but just something that's, like, literally life-changing. They're less itchy. They don't wake up bleeding anymore,
Mm,
and that's just, you know, picturing that kid suffering, because they show me what they're dealing with, what they're contending with
mm.
when we first start. And
Sure.
obviously and I know where they are when we first start, because there has to be a pain significant enough to drive them to, embark on this journey.
Yeah.
And I know that they're really, really suffering. The whole family is suffering.
Yeah.
And to relieve that in any small part is just, yeah, that's what affirms what I'm doing, and keeps me going.
It's one thing to deal with an adult who's going through because adults have the ability to cope with a lot. Obviously, we as humans can cope with a lot. We have to. That's what life is all about. Um, but kids, they don't have the coping mechanisms yet. They don't have the ability to find peace within their own mind about certain things. And the fact that, especially such young children, infants, um, you know, that it hurts. And so that just goes right through you. And so to find that they're reaching back out to you and saying thank you for this. It's not perfect, but it's so much better. It's such a relief. Obviously, with those I work with chemical and mold sensitivities, they'll never be cured. I don't think there is a cure for the individual. I think there is a cure for us collectively. And we can talk about that all day long. How we cure this is it will take generations to cure because of what we are embedding in our own DNA from what we eat and what we surround ourselves with. So, and I'm sure you kind of feel the same way with eczema.
Yeah. I mean, I get these messages within a week or two of people, like, doing this program, or even just listening to the podcast. But then, I mean, like, the cure is the wrong word, but we go for reversal, right? Like,
Mm,
there just shouldn't be there shouldn't be a standard separate from vibrant health for your kids, right? Like,
mm,
adults are adults, and they make their own choices, right? And they know, like, oh, I could eat these french fries or this broccoli, and they can decide for themselves, and they know which is better, and they can completely decide. But kids, right, they are born into your world. You're curating every single thing that they're eating, that's in the home, that they're exposed to. And you just have to make those intentional, conscious choices. Like, that's your responsibility, like, for the gifts that you were given, right? Like, those kids that you were given, you have to rise, you have to do this.
So as the newborn or the new parents that are listening or the soon to be new parents listening, what are the warning signs that they should be looking for with their kids?
I mean, any sort of, like, itchiness. I mean, like, babies, right? Like, they have that just naturally baby soft skin. If there's anything subpar from that, like, there shouldn't require products or anything like that to stay that way. Like,
Okay.
even diaper rash, if they're getting that a lot, like, if you're just seeing anything, abnormal, like, it just doesn't, it's a lot of times, like, really subtle. And if it's not, I mean, if it's staring you in the face, like it was for me,
Mhm.
right? There's a lot you can do. And I just feel like it's, you break it down into um the sources of inflammation in your home, right?
Mhm.
And so for us, like, we looked at water first, because then I was concerned about, we were already filtering our drinking water, but when all this was coming about, like I call it like our eczema storm, then we looked into, we installed a whole house water filter, because there's just so much getting into our kids just through the bath water, right?
Right.
They're like sitting in it. And I want that, like I recommend daily baths, just to, like, one, for sanitary reasons, but also it's like a sincere therapy. It's like a detox therapy when you put the right things in it. So that was like the first thing that we did, was look into the water.
So, um, pediatricians today, in your opinion, do you think that they are um, able to address this? Are they still on a learning curve?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right? Like when you go to medical school, and I love doctors, right? They're amazing people, and they obviously pursued this career because they want to help people. But medical school, unfortunately, is centered around pharmaceuticals. And I mean, that's just another part of it. It's just like, I can't, that saddens me so to the core, is to think of kids that are facing a lifetime of pharmaceuticals, right? And the side effects of those pharmaceuticals, and then more pharmaceuticals to counter the side effects of those pharmaceuticals, right? It's just like in this endless list of doctor's appointments and specialist appointments, like that's just not the way, right? Like I just knew, in standing in that pediatrician office, like, wow, this is not where we should be. Not is This is not what is going to get us to health. And so, yeah, they're just not there,
Not
unfortunately.
there.
I don't
And
I
then,
don't see
you
that.
probably get pushed off to a dermatologist, and dermatologists, at least in my experience, they're nice people, but I don't think they treat everything with steroids, or of some sort, whether it's oral or a cream. I remember myself, uh, about 10, 15 years ago, uh, developed a head to toe rash that felt like my skin turned to leather.
Hmm.
It just came out of nowhere, and it was absolutely horrible. I went to see a dermatologist. They put me on a full round of steroids. Went away. About 2 months later, came back, and now I started thinking to myself, "This is not right. Obviously, this shouldn't happen. What's going on in my environment that's causing this?" Talk about environments, and I'm not chemically sensitive, at least not to what my customers go through. But I actually was able to pinpoint there was a specific material that we were testing back in our warehouse to see if it's something we wanted to carry for professional use. It was a two-component epoxy for the woodworking industry. And whenever I use these things, I wear gloves because I don't know. I mean, obviously, I deal with materials that are very, very healthy, supposedly. Um, but I wear gloves to make sure I don't get it on my skin. And I realized what happened was I was mixing the two components together. And then when applying to wood, my face was over the wood while I was applying this material, because I realized the second time it started on my face first.
Hmm.
And then it dawned on me, and it's got to be that epoxy material we were dealing with. And then I did that deep dive, the sleepless nights, into research of exactly what was the problem. And it turned out to be an ingredient in all epoxies called an isocyanate that some people can have a sensitivity to. And with me, it was not touching it. It was just the fume of it while it was rising from the surface. I stopped using that product, never had the problem again. But then I had to go through 2 rounds of steroids, and who knows what else that did to my system. I might still be dealing with this. So yeah, those are the things that I look at from a chemical standpoint, but obviously you're dealing with it from, that skin reaction standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, that's what happens, right? Is like, you go to the pediatrician when your kid is sick, because that's what you do. And
Hmm.
then they push you to the dermatologist, and that's, yeah, like you said, a combination of steroids and antibiotics, and that just further integrates the problem, because now you're killing any good bacteria that's there, right? Like if you're experiencing eczema or any autoimmune condition, like there's clearly a dysbiosis happening, where the bad bugs are overrunning the
Hmm.
good bugs. Now you're taking antibiotics and suppressing everything that's happening with steroids, right? And then you might even get a moment, a glimpse of relief. But for a lot of my 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 clients, they don't see any relief, right? And now they have to deal with TSW, and that's topical steroid withdrawal. And now
Mm,
the problem is 10 times worse, right? And they don't want to sign their child up for a lifetime of pharmaceuticals. And then they have to get through just this extra tunnel, right? Just of inflammation and their body detoxing. Because then, if you continue down that route, right, and then you see the dermatologists, and then you might be referred to the allergist, right? And then they'll do an allergy test, and there's IgE reactions and there's IgG reactions, right? And then so for the most part, you'll know the IgE reactions because your kid, that's like anaphylactics, that's
mm,
severe allergies.
mhm,
So that's what the allergist is testing for. And so in some cases, there'll be there's none, like, and then in some cases it's like, well, they're significantly um, reactive to dairy, but you would have already known this information, in
mhm,
bringing your kid into it, like you would have seen those effects. So it's just, and then even when you go into like the regular tests, like say you see an integrative pediatrician, which is like a step further and helpful, they're going to refer you to all these tests that, like then they're checking for IgG and they're checking for stool tests and dysbiosis, and you're just going to spend thousands of dollars and get this information that, again, you already know. Like, yeah, they're reacting to a whole lot of anything that they're like eating and anything that they're exposed to. Like, their results are just going to look like a Christmas tree because there's already just all this inflammation going on in the body, right? And there's leaky gut, and all these toxins are circulating throughout their body. There's like lymph stagnation and liver stagnation, right? It's just not a pretty picture inside. And so and then you'll get the stool where results back and be like, there's a huge dysbiosis. I'm like, yes, I know. And so anyway, I don't that route just doesn't work. It's expensive, it takes a lot of time, and you're left with either no results or something that just even furthers your condition that you now have to overcome.
more questions than you had before you went in.
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, one of the things I gleaned out of that was, the use of topical steroid creams. It may help short term, alleviate some of that issue, but long term, it's probably much, much worse because you're not actually dealing with the crux of the problem. It's like using a nose spray because when you have a stuffy nose to try to clear your nasal passages, but what happens when you start to use that is you become dependent on it, and now you can't stop. And
Yeah.
now, if you go 3 minutes in between sprays, your nose closes up.
Mhm.
And the only fix there is, essentially a detoxing from that. It seems like you're detoxing from a drug. Well, you are, in a way, or, surgical to install, a stent.
Yeah.
And so, boy, it brings up so many more ideas and questions, but family is looking at this where their child has these symptoms that you described. What do you think the best first step is for them?
I mean, every parent has to feed their kid like multiple times a day. So I first recommend cleaning up the diet. And the diet has to be at best anti-inflammatory and real whole foods. If you just do that, if you cut out the processed foods, that's a huge, huge step toward toward, clear skin and just overall health. But, the thing with my clients is they're already there, right? They're already
Right.
there. And that's where I was. I cut out
Sure.
every single thing ever, ever, ever. And then I'm still dealing with this issue. But you definitely start in the kitchen. Just like abs are made in the kitchen. Like, have you ever heard that? Like,
Hmm.
like it's the same. Health is what you put in is what you get out. And ultimately though, it's like what you digest is like determines your state of health. And if your kid has had any sort of autoimmune condition, they're not digesting, they're not absorbing the nutrients from their food. So even when they're eating the healthiest diet possible, the problem is going to persist because you haven't completely rebooted their digestion. They haven't healed and sealed their gut. So then we go into that. But start there. Start in the kitchen. Real whole foods that you made.
And then it goes to what are they surrounding themselves with? And what I mean is skincare items, shampoo, soaps, clothing, right? I mean, clothing can be enormous factor here.
Oh yeah.
And then what you're washing the clothes with, and
Right.
then it's
Those are easy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
then
there are
it's the house. What's happening in the home that could be triggering, and then what's happening outside of the home in other locations. As you said before, we as humans spend 90% of our lives indoors. And so it's not what's happening outside that's causing any issues with us, what's happening in our homes, in our schools, in our places of business. So how old are your kids now?
they're 9, 7, 5, and 2.
Okay, so how did the process working with the schools and
Mhm.
trying to get teachers and maintenance staff and so forth maybe to recognize this and not be uh, more of a deterrent.
Yeah. That was fun, but worth it because they're spending like, 30 hours, 30 plus hours in that school environment. So as I mentioned, I was in the dental industry for a long time and I focused on, uh, OSHA seminars and hygiene practices, right, for dental offices. Okay. So I knew a lot about cleaning and the different stages of cleaning. And then like the requisites, like that these, the schools and the daycares, have to contend with, right? Like they're not making these rules. But unfortunately, bleach is like the cheapest, easiest option for them to contend with the requisites that are put on them by the Board of Health in their county. So our school was told me that their cleaning budget for the year was $15, like for supplies, right? And this just means buckets of bleach, right? And
Hmm.
you're supposed to dilute them in different percentages depending on, cleaning or disinfecting or sanitizing. And there's different things that you have to do throughout the day as a teacher. But, I went into my daughter's preschool class and I was watching them spray the nap mats and spray the tables, and the kids are spraying the tables, as part of the cleanup. You have to do all that. And they're in it. They're in it. And all the doors are closed and the windows are closed because you can't, I don't know, open any windows because kids can go out or something.
Right.
So, like that was before, that was probably while I was pregnant with my third daughter. And it just was like, wow, this is a lot, and I honestly put it to the side. It's like, darn, that's just is the way it is. But then once we contended with this issue and then they went back to school that next year, I just couldn't put them back in an environment like that, like knowing that it was deleterious for their health after I had worked so hard to restore their health. So you have to email like the county health commissioner, which your school will know who that person is because they have to check in with them throughout the year, and that's how they maintain their licensure, and ask them to approve different cleaners. And I found one. It's called EnviroCleanse A, that that works as a sanitizer and a disinfectant, and you don't have to leave it on the surfaces for 10 minutes at a time before you wipe it up. Like none of that's going to work in a school environment. So anyway, it complies with everything that the schools and the daycares have to do, but it's just not going to harm their lungs the way that bleach would.
Wow, what a process. And we think about this like you might be sometimes you can take a step forwards, but then you take two steps backwards in another direction. And so it's like bleach. It may be effective for one thing, but it's highly ineffective for something else. Like in our industry with mold, I mean, bleach is used all the time by contractors and homeowners to say, "Oh, there's mold on the surface. Just put some bleach on it; it'll be fine." It actually might take the color away from the surface. It doesn't actually kill the mold. Mold will come back stronger when hit with bleach. And so, you have to look at this and say, "Well, the entire process is just done incorrectly." And I'm not talking about the cleaning process. I am talking about schools. I'm talking about the way we build, the way we live. Uh, we shouldn't have to be in these school environments where, because of energy regulations, you have to keep the window shut. When you keep the window shut, you don't get enough fresh air in. When you don't get enough fresh air, the kids have to deal with what's called school air. And we all know that school air leads to severe mental issues. I mean, Dr. Doris Rapp has done, she did decades of research on this and proved that school air is incredibly detrimental to kids' mental health. Um, so if we would just design our processes different, like to be good for the student, to be good for the teachers, health wise, everything else falls in place. But we always look at it from a standpoint of budget. Like you said, they have, just a few bucks for cleaner. That's all we can budget for. So we have to find the cheapest stuff possible. It may clean, quote unquote, a surface, but it doesn't actually make the surface and the space healthier. It makes it worse. So I don't know, how we start with this. Maybe it's the fact that, or I guess the fact that more people are homeschooling their kids than ever before because they just cannot, like you did, work with the school board and the health department and so forth. In some locations, they don't allow anybody to come in and give them opinions, educated opinions. But we do, as parents, as adults and leaders in our communities, we need to be more vocal about this because it's not just educating the kids, but actually keeping them safe, keeping them healthy.
Yeah, yeah. Because whatever they learn, it's just like if you're eating just a diet of kale, if you're not digesting it right, it's not gonna do you any good. And the same thing, if you're at the best school and you're learning the best stuff, it's not gonna do you any good if you're not healthy. And, you know, I'm glad I went through that because you can make a difference, you can change it. And what ended up happening was I just provided the buckets of EnviroCleanse for my kids' classrooms,
Yep.
like that's just where we were. And that's okay. And we homeschool now, and it's not even because of their health, like it's because we had to move. But if anyone's watching this, I'm coming to you from my car because now we homeschool. And so I have 4 kids and they're real and they're they're all at home being so loud. So I can't I can't have a conversation with you or really anybody else during the school day. But you can't. Like no matter where you are, if you want your kids to go to school, it's magical. Just, you're going to have to do these emails, but if you already have the solution, so just seek out EnviroCleanse, like they're amazing. And then you could also do Branch Basics is
Mhm.
another brand that I really like. And that's just for like the most basic level of cleaning. Like that's not gonna, serve the requisites of the other things, but like, those two
Mhm.
products you can go in with those. Like if you just go in with a solution, you don't just go in complaining, right?
Mhm.
Just go in with a solution and you can make changes happen.
I think that's a key point there is going in there with solutions to how to solve the problem with the actual liquid solutions of how to take care of it. But going in there not just complaining about what's going on, because I am sure as anybody, they start to hear this and they start to hear complaints about this and that, they just kind of tune it out. So to say, here's the problem we're dealing with, and here's how it's fixed, and I'm happy to provide it. And hopefully at some point the school starts to buy it themselves because, it's for everybody's sake. Boy, I could go on talking about this all day. I know you can't because you have a house full of kids. And so, um, these are the types of conversations I am sure you have with your clients,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
You can visit my website, eczemakids.com, or check out my podcast, which is the Eczema Kids podcast. And, we have skincare, of course, we have coaching. I just want your kids to be well. And I just want you to be successful in this mission. Like you have to be successful in this mission. So I do everything humanly possible to support you in that.
Well, we will certainly put all that contact information in the show notes. Encourage everybody to reach out. You really provide an amazing service for folks, and I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you're a parent of so many children, and you also do this at the same time. I don't even have kids, and I feel like my life is going at 110% all the time. So you are an amazing person. Thank you so much for coming today, folks. Please reach out to Andra and please follow her podcast. There's so much good information out there, and I am sure she will be able to enlighten you on your journey. Andra, thanks again for coming today.
Thank you, Andy. It was so fun.
Awesome.